Hilchas Trumas Perek Chamishi, ein termin elam na yofa. Shenemer b'harimchem es chelbi mimenu, so since it says chelbi, we learn that it has to be min hayofa. So the Aruch HaShulchan says that the din is that it has to be min hayofa, it means it shouldn't be min hara la yofa, it should be min hayofa la ra. But if there's an option of min hara la ra, so there's no hechrich that it should be min hayofa la ra. It just means that it shouldn't be min hara la yofa, but min hara la ra is also fine. But the Rebbe is medayik from Lashon Rambam of ein term min elam min hayofa, that lechatchila it should be min hayofa. In other words, it shouldn't be min hara la ra, but rather it should be min hayofa, even if it means min hayofa la ra. I'll go upon him. Ein term min elam min hayofa, shenemer b'harimchem es chelbi mimenu. Now this din of min hayofa, so also the Rebbe learns that it's not a din of the hafroshas truma, that the hafroshas truma have to be min hayofa. It's a din that it has to be min hayofa in order for the nesino lekein should be min hayofa. This is the ikar of din of min hayofa is that the nesino lekein should be min hayofa. And since the nesino lekein is preferable to be min hamiskayim than to be min hayofa, so therefore if there's a choice of having min hayofa or min hamiskayim, something that's going to last longer or something that's min hayofa, so therefore, if min hayofa would be a din of the mais hafrasha, so then there would be an order to say, einachinami for the kain it's better to be min hamiskayim, but lepel in the mais hafrasha has to be min hayofa. So now the Rebbe is saying no, that the whole din min hayofa is only that the kohen should get min hayofa. So the mele, since for the kohen it's better to be min hamiskayim, so therefore, if it's a choice of miskayim and yofa, so you do miskayim. That's the hemshech here. V'im ein shom kohen, so then it's Terumos min hamiskayim, afal pi sheyeshem yofa she'ein miskayim. So if you have a choice, it should be min hayofa la miskayim, or miskayim la yofa, should be min hamiskayim. Kesa, Terumos te'enim ala gregris. Te'enim are fresh figs, and gregris are dried figs. Dried figs last longer than fresh figs. So in Mela, normally, but te'enim are nicer than gregris, than dried figs. So Kesa, Terumos te'enim ala gregris, because that's the yofa. However, b'mokim she'ein shom kohen, and therefore you don't have a kohen to give it away right away. So then it's Terumos gregris ala te'enim. So then it's preferable to have something that's miskayim. So in Mela it should end up being by the kohen. V'mrogel lasis te'enim gregris. So if anyways you normally make from te'enim gregris, so in Mela, so even if you're going to be Terumos and te'enim, you'll be able to eventually make it into gregris, and b'pashtus you will make it into gregris. V'mrogel lasis te'enim gregris. So then, Terumos min te'enim ala gregris afilu b'mokim she'ein shom kohen. So even though there's no kohen there, so l'chura at this point in time you should prefer the miskayim, but nevertheless your Terumos min te'enim ala gregris, because you falozach that he's going to turn the te'enim into gregris. Aval b'mokim sheyesh b'kohen, so it's always ein Terumos min hagregris ala te'enim afilu b'mokim shedarkan lasas te'enim gregris. As l'chura, you could think, since it's a mokum shedarkan lasas te'enim gregris, so let's be Terumos min hagregris ala te'enim, because ultimately the te'enim are going to become gregris. We say no. Since lepel te'enim are yofim min hagregris, so you should do min te'enim, unless there is ein shom kohen and it's ein darkan lasas te'enim gregris. So therefore, you should do gregris because it's a miskayim. That's not good. Halacha base. Termin botzel sholim afal pi shu cotton. Again, you have to be Terumos min hayofa. A botzel, an onion is a sholim, is yofa, and it's also miskayim because it'll last longer. So mainly you should be Terumos a botzel sholim afal pi shu cotton. Avalei chatzi botzel afal pi shu gadol b'chol makom. You always a Terumos rather a small botzel which is cotton than a chatzi botzel which is gadol. Now the mile in a chatzi botzel which is gadol is brought down that it could be sweeter. The larger onions are sweeter, so l'chura you could think that maybe there's a mile of yafa. But on the other end, there's a mile of shalim. Shalim makes it into a yafa, and also shalim is a miskayim. So therefore, you should be Terumos from a botzel shalim, even if it means making it a cotton, as opposed to a not a botzel shalim, even if it means it's a gadol. En termin mimin al she'eni minei, shenemar kedogen min hagerin, ukimlei min hayekev, which they're both the same min. The dogen of the gator is the grain from the granary, and the kimlei min hayekev means the full grapes from the yekev, which is where you have the vat of wine. V'im taram, and if you were Terumos, is ein trumasi truma, and those truma from a min al she'eni min is muchatchila natchal. As we'll learn, if it's a yafa, if it's The mineral yafa it is chal, but min a min al shein min is b'chalal not chal. Halacha gimel hakishas v'amalofefein. It's two types of cucumber. One of them is like a white cucumber, is min echot, and kol min chitim, all types of wheat, is echot. Kon bin te'enim ugregris udvela. Te'enim is fresh figs, and gregris are dried figs, and dvela are pressed figs, are all echot, and therefore v'terim mizelzeh. V'chol shu kalayim b'chaveri, the two species are kalayim one with the other, so that means they're two separate minim, so therefore le'yitrim mizelzeh, and afilim and ayafel hara, even if one is a better and the other one is not as good, so nevertheless, since they're two minim, so you can't be terim one on the other. Ketzat? Hoyele chamishim so chitim, v'chamishim so se'irim b'bayis echot, and v'hifrish al akeil shnei soim chitim, so chitim is the yafel legabi se'irim, so nevertheless, einam truma, it's not truma. Ad Lashon Rambam is einam truma. You would be able to l'chura learn that einam truma means the chitim on the seirim is not truma, but the chitim on the chitim is truma. So if you have two saw of one saw of chitim and one saw of seirim, and you were mafresh for both of them, I mean you had chamishim saw of chitim, chamishim saw of seirim, and you were mafresh two saw of chitim for both of them. So you would l'chura assume that one saw of the chitim, one saw of these two saw should be truma because they were on the chitim, and the other saw which was on the seirim, that's not truma. But Lepel, they bring from the Mishnah Yishena, from the Tiferes Yisrael, that since you were mafresh bebasacha, seifer the chitim, seifer the seirim, and on the seirim it's not chal because it's a min b'sheini minei, so who adin, it's not chal on the chitim, it's a chidush. Al kol ponim in Rambam, it says Lashon, that's Pasha Lashon Rambam, einam truma. V'chol she'eni kalayim b'chaveri, if you have two species which are kalayim b'chaveri, so that's, you can't be mafresh one on the other, but v'chol she'eni kalayim b'chaveri, so then, and you have two minim which have the din of the same min, but one could be a yofa, one could be a ra, is terim min hayofa al hara. Avolei min hara al hayofa. Abavim torim, if you were terim min hara al hayofa, so b'diavad, trumasi truma, chutz min hazunin al hachitim. Now zunim is a type of chitim, but it's not really edible. It's given normally to behemoths. So maybe pashtus is b'chalal not chayiv and hafrashus to. It's not only a min b'sheini minei. When the Rambam is calling it, in the Mishnah, it's called like a min b'sheini minei. But l'chura, the zunin are really not even chayiv b'truma. So maybe so chutz min hazunin al hachitim, b'pnei she'ein eichel adam, it's not considered eichel adam. So therefore, you can't be mafresh from zunin al chitim, even though l'chura they're both min chitim, because they're not edible by people. Halacha Dalet, ein termin midavar shenigmur malachtei, al davar shalei nigmur malachtei. So no, the davar shalei nigmur malachtei, that's the one that's being mesukin, and v'lei midavar shalei nigmur malachtei, al davar shalei nigmur malachtei, even if they're both lei nigmur malachtei, also you shouldn't be teirim before the nigmur malachtei, even though side the one that's being mufresh, and side the thing that is being mufresh for is all lei nigmur malachtei. And also, v'lei midavar shalei nigmar malachtei al davar shalei nigmar malachtei. So the kudas advarim, something that's lei nigmar malachtei shouldn't be involved. Not if they're both lei nigmar malachtei, not if the mufresh is davar shalei nigmar malachtei, shalei nigmar malachtei, and not if the thing you're being mafresh for, the shirayim, is davar shalei nigmar malachtei. Shnamar kadog min hagerin kamlei min hayekev. So we learn out min hagomer ala gomer. They're both gomer. In Tarmu lepel, if you attain them, is trumasi truma. So just like min hayofa l'ara, min hara l'yofa, you shouldn't be taken min hara l'yofa, but b'diavad, it's trumas. Al derech zeh, you shouldn't be taken from davar shalei nigmar malachtei in any scenario. But lepeil, if it was tarmu, is trumas and truma. Halacha hein me'emasai terminus hagorin. Those says, when is it considered nigmar malachtei? Which at that point in time you could be terminus hagorin. Misha Yivre. Here it says Misha Yivre, but they bring the Kes Mishnah that the girsa should be Yitzber. In other words, when you make the pile, that's called the Gemar when it's Nigmar Malachtei, and that's the time where Lechatchila you could be Mafresh Truma. Savar mixes, again here it says Bir mixes, but the girsa Savar mixes, if you already only made a partial pile, you made some of it, you made a pile, so then Termin min habar al she'eni bar. So even though normally you're not supposed to be teirim min davar shenigmar malachtei al davar shalei nigmar malachtei, but the vice is that this madreg of nigmar malachtei is not such a. It's not like it's not like so far off. So once you started already making a pile of part of it, so the rest of it becomes bottled to the pile. And but lepel, you're supposed to be terim min hayafa al hara. So in Mele, you should be terim min hatzover al she'eni tzover. That's the Mefarshim explain. That this is not really considered mamishli nigma malachte, and therefore, as long as it was already partially tzover, so the other part is considered bottled. But lechatchila, you should be better. You should be terim min hatzover al she'eni tzover. Now hamachne shibolim l'teir beisei la'seisen meliles. You bring the shibolim into your house. You bring stalks of wheat into your house, and you're going to eat it as kernels. So whereas normally shibolim is not considered nigma malachte. But over here, since you brought it in your house and you're going to eat it in a way of melilis, so therefore, I raise the terim min hashibolim. That's considered nigrum malachte, and therefore lechatchila you could be terim min hashibolim. Halacha vov me'emasai terminus hagas. When is the gas considered? In other words, you started already giving truma from the gas. It's considered wine, and it's nigrum malachte. Mishiyahalchu b'shesiver. When the people that were working went both ways, they went horizontally or vertically, not horizontally, but they went both ways, to the length and to the width. So memela, so that's called, there was already started the process of making it into wine. When is it considered that you started already making the oil? Once you loaded on the heavy piece of wood, the heavy beam on top of the olives and started pressing it in order for the oil to come out, that's already considered the Gemar Malachte. So it's pointed out there, the Ramar brings from the Briskerov that Legabi other things, in other words, you want to know when it's considered Nigmar Malachte. Legabi, that you're not allowed to eat any more Achilas Arai, and you have to give Meiser, Tumas and Meiser, you can no longer eat Achilas Arai. That's a different shir. That's when you already put it into the barrels, and you started taking out all the pits and the peels. So that's a different shir. It's not the same shir. There's a shir of when lechatchila you could be teirim. That's one shir. That's nigmar malachti legabi, that shir. And then there's another shir when it's considered nigmar malachti in order to be kavua to meiser, that you're no longer allowed to eat achilas sarah. It's two separate shir. Halacha zayin. Ein termin min haTorah al atomi. Now there's Torah dikatum and Truma dikatum and Tomi dikatruma. Now with Torah dikatruma you could eat, the kohen eats it, and Tomi dikatruma, the kohen burns it. Now it's considered like two minim. In other words, even though the chura is better for the kohen to get Torah dikatruma, then so if you have tevel which is Torah and you have tevel which is Tomi, so the chura, the kohen would prefer to have all his truma from the Torah dikatruma. Memela, all of the truma he'll be able to eat, but nevertheless, ein termin min haTorah al atomi. It's considered like two separate minim, and therefore lechatchila you shouldn't be terim min haTorah al atomi. However, v'im tarim, if you were terim, is trumasi truma. The truma is chal. V'halacha l'meish misinai she'igol shel dveila she'nitma miktzasi. If you have a cake of pressed figs, they all together. Now part of it became tummy. So since each fig is separately, so the fact that part of it became tummy doesn't mean all of them become tummy. You know, each one is mutami, the one next to each other. But as far as it goes, you know, let's say something becomes a rishon l'tummy, it can make a sheni. If it's trumi, it can make a shlishi. But it won't go further. She'igol shel dveila she'nitma miktzasei. So part of this eagle is tummy and part of it is Torah. Is term lechatchila min haTorah shebei al atomi shebei. Even though normally you're not supposed to be Torah min haTorah al atomi, but that's when they're two separate things. But over here, since it's one eagle shel dveila, and even though part of it is tummy and part of it is Torah, so over here there's an exception, and you could be Torah min haTorah al atomi. And v'lei eagle bulvad with shu guf echad, they're pressed together and they became one piece. Afilu agudah shel yerek. If you have a bundle of yerakas, or afilu arema shel chitim, you have a pile of wheat. Shenitmum sasim, and part of it is tummy and part of it is Torah. And again, the seder is normally that ain't termin min haTorah al atomi, but nevertheless, termin min haTorah sheba al atomi sheba. That's talking about if it's one pile, if it's one cake of dveil. Avolim hoyu shnei yigulim, ishtei agudis, ishtei aremis. If you have two separate cakes of figs, or you have two separate bundles of yerakis, or you have two separate piles of tvua. Achas tmei of achas teira b'tzido. One is tummy, one is Torah. Is leyitrim min haTorah al atomi. Lechatchila you shouldn't be teirim min ha-Torah la-Tomei lechatchila. That's only b'negei regular truma. B'negei trumas meiser, the din is termin trumas meiser min ha-Torah la-Tomei lechatchila. Lechatchila you're allowed to be termin trumas meiser min ha-Torah la-Tomei shenamer es migdash mimenu. So we learn now tulman on the Kodesh Shabbat you could take out from the Kodesh Shabbat. You could take out the trumas meiser, even though you're taking the trumas meiser from the Torah, and lepel you're doing it on the Torah. It doesn't make a difference. And you tell tulman on the Kodesh Shabbat, which is also means from the Torah. Tulman on the Kodesh Shabbat, take out the Torah, even though the other part is tummy. That's the limud that we have. Ma'is says this din is also, it's the shayla of it's a din d'iraisa or din d'rabbanan. From Lashon Rambam, the Parshas HaMashmoy says that it's a din d'iraisa. And the Rambam said before Allah Chal Sinai that this whole din is a din d'iraisa. So in other words, there's a din d'iraisa that b'negei regular truma, you shouldn't be mafresh min ha-Torah al-Atomei, and b'negei trumas ma'isa, there's a limud as mikdashim imenu tulas ha-mekudesh habei, so you could be mafresh min ha-Torah al-Atomei. But there are other risheim that learn that it's all a din d'rabbanan, and the din d'rabbanan was since by truma you have to be mafresh min ha-mukiv. So we're afraid if you're going to be mafresh min ha-Torah al-Atomei, you may end up being metami the Torah, because the Torah the truma, because you're being mafresh min ha-Torah al-Atomei, and it's mukiv. Masha'enkin trumas ma'isa, which we learned before, there's no chiyuv that the trumas ma'isa should be min ha-mukiv, so therefore there's no concern of being metami the trumas ma'isa. But in Rambam it's not mafur. The Rambam doesn't say that. The Rambam just says there's a din, you're allowed to be mafresh min ha-Torah al-Atomei, and he brings that halacha mishmisina when you're allowed to. And then, but again, trumas ma'isa, there's a pasuk that tells us that at that over there you are allowed to. Okay. Halacha ches. Ein termin min ha-Tomei al-Torah. Before we were talking about Torah al-Tomei, but over here we're saying ein termin min ha-Tomei al-Torah. V'im Torah, if you were termin min ha-Tomei al-Torah, so b'shegig, if you weren't aware that it was Tomei, is trumasi truma. However, b'mezid, if it was done b'mezid, is lei sikanas asherayim. So the part that you were mafresh for didn't become chulin. Normally, when you mafresh truma, it becomes chulin. Lei sikanas asherayim, v'zeh shehedim truma, and what you were mafresh was truma, and v'yazer v'yitim. So in other words, the Chacham instituted that lapel what you were mafresh was truma, but on the other end, you have to be mafresh truma again from the Torah. If you are mafresh min ha-Tomei al Torah, so what you were mafresh was taka truma, but on the other hand, the truma that you were the Torah dika, which was the shirayim, you have to be mafresh truma again. You weren't aware that it was tummy, so then we consider that a shegig, and therefore, b'di'eved lepel if you were mafresh min ha-Tomei al Torah, it was mistaken. The shirayim were misukin. Aval miyada v'shogag shemuter litre min ha-Tomei al Torah. But if you made a mistake and you thought that you're allowed to be, you knew this was Tomei, you knew this was Torah, and your shegig was that you thought you're allowed to be mafresh min ha-Tomei al Torah, is areu k'mezid, that has it in mezid, and therefore it's considered as if you did it b'mezid, and therefore the truma that you mafresh has a din of truma. But on the other hand, the shirayim still you have to be masaking again, you have to be mafresh truma again. And v'chein b'trumas ma'isa, that din saying would apply to trumas ma'isa, the same din. That if it's b'shegig, if you took the trumas ma'isa, something that was tummy, for the rest of the ma'isa, which was Torah, so again the same thing. If it was b'shegig, it was nesaken. If it was b'mezid, so it became truma. But the other hand, you still have to do it again. You have to be mafresh again trumas ma'isa from the shirayim. And what does shegig mean? Shegig means you weren't aware that it was tummy. But if you thought you knew it was tummy, and you thought you were allowed to do it, that's not called shegig. Halacha tes. Ein termin min ha-mechuber ala tolush. Whereas the chi of truma is only chal, it could only be chal when it's tolush. So you can't be termin min ha-mechuber ala tolush. And also, v'le'a min ha-tolush ala mechuber. Ketzad, hoyole peiris tlushin. You had peiris which were detached from the tree. V'amar peiris elu yu truma, al peiris elu ha-mechubarim. Afilu likshe yitolshu, you said that they should become ersh truma when kshe yitolshu, when these peiros will be detached from the ground. That's when these shirayim will be detached from the ground. That's when these peiros, which are already mechuber, which are already told should become truma. So nevertheless, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Another situation was Shehoyu le'shtei arugas, he has 2 rows. V'amar peiros aruga zu tlushin, yiu truma al peiros aruga zu mechubarim. And over here he didn't say l'shei yitolshu. Because in the first case, even he said l'shei yitolshu. The second case is talking about that he didn't say mechubarim, l'shei yitolshu. Or the other way, peiros Amar, peiros aruga zu mechubarim, yiu truma al peiros aruga zu tlushim. So all these things are le'omer klum. That's le'omer klum. However, im Amar, peiros aruga zu tlushim, yiu truma al peiros aruga zu l'shei yitolshu. So in other words, he's not saying there should be chal right now, but he's saying peiros aruga zu, which are tlushim, should be truma on peiros aruga zu l'shei yitolshu, and v'nitlushu, and then eventually they would nitlushu, is heilu biyada l'teil shom, so therefore is eine mechus ha'maisa, or l'shei yitolshu shneim dvarav kayom. Now the passage l'shei yitolshu shneim means when the second one will also be a tolush, because he's saying peiros zu tlushim should be truma and peiros zu mechubarim l'shei yitolshu. So when they're both going to be tolush, is dvarav kayom. But the Darchamuna brings that huadin, it doesn't, even if they will chatchila both mechubarim, they were both mechubarim. And he says the peiros of this aruga should be truma for the peiros of this aruga when they will both be tolush. So also it's chal, because the fact that right now they're mechubar, it's not considered a mechusar maisa, because all it needs is tlisha. Therefore, it's not called mechusar maisa. Ukshiyitolshu shneim dvarav kayom. Abavu sheyaviu shteim shlish meisha amar. They already reached a third of their growth. In other words, you can't speak about something which is going to grow, because that's not biyodi. In other words, here we're talking about something that grew already. There's only a chsarn that it's mechubar lekarka. And since lepel, for them to become not mechubar lekarka, only involves in pulling it out or detaching it, so that's not really considered a chsarn maisa, and therefore you could be meichel achales now, lik sheyitolshu. Now the maisa is in the beginning of the halacha, and Lochates, the Rambam says that hoyole peiros tlushim, v'amar peiros elu yu truma al peiros ela mechubarim afilu l'ksheyitoshu, and the din is that it's not chal. Over here he's saying that it is chal. So the Mefarshim explained that the pshat is over there. It's talking about peiros eila. So over there to go up on the tree and to detach it is an involved act. So therefore you can't say that it's eina mechusa maisa. Mashenkin over here, since it's something which is it's growing on the ground, it's only a question of pulling it out. So therefore, that's not really considered a mechusa maisa, and therefore it could be chal. It's nachamol. So the din is azay. If a person wants to be mafresh, in other words, in order for truma to be chal, it's pashut that it could be only chal on peiros tlushim. It can't be chal on peiros mechubarim, and it has to be side that the peiros which are being chal truma is tolush, and side the shirayim, which the ones that are being knitter through this truma is also tolush. So it has to be both tolush. Now, if they're both, if there's an aruga that's growing and they're both mechuber, and they already grew a third, so if they didn't grow a third, so the bechlan not beged the truma, and it's not biyodi. So there's nothing to talk about. But if these things grew already a third, the question is only that they need tlisha, so you could be meichel now a chales on these peiros, and say that when both of them will be tolush, even if they're both now mechuber, or if one of them is mechuber, so when they both be tolush, so that's when the chales truma should be chal, you could do that. But medvar mamurim, when we're dealing with things that grow on the ground, and it's only a question of being tolush, ksheyi tolshu. Mashenkin, a tree, which has peiros on the tree, since it's more involved to take the peiros off, so therefore if you're being meichel, Hashem truma on peiros that are tlushim, for peiros that are mechubarim, even if you say l'ksheyi tolshu, that's considered mechusa maisa, and memela the truma is not chal. Halacha yud, ein termin min halach ala yovish, v'lei min hayovish ala halach. In other words, dried out fruit, you cannot be termin not min halach ala yovish, v'lei min hayovish ala halach. However, vim tarim, since they're both edible, they're still a meichel adam, so therefore truma is truma ketza. Liket yerek hayem v'liket mimenu l'mocher. So normally yerakos don't really last. So a normal yerek, if today it's fresh, but tomorrow it's already dry. Is liket yerek hayem v'liket mimenu l'mocher is ein teim in mizalza, because one of them is fresh, the other one is dry. Elim kein darke lishtamer beis yom, unless you have a yerek which lasts for 2 days and they will remain fresh for 2 days. Yerek shedarke lishtamer gimul yom kigenam lafafenas. Cucumbers which last for 3 days, and they remain fresh for 3 days. It's kol shalikat b'shleish yom. Anything that you detached during a period of 3 days, within 3 days of each other, is mitzdaref and v'terim mizal zeh. Yerek shedarke lishtama yemechet b'lvav, a vegetable which only lasts for 1 day, and v'likat b'shachas v'likat b'erev. You detach one vegetable in the morning and the other one in the evening. It's memela, since it's within the same day. Is memela terim mizal zeh. So the nekudas hadvarim is you shouldn't be terim from things that look like two separate minim. In other words, lach and yavesh is like two separate minim. So in other words, even though l'chura yach, lach is yafa and yavesh is not yafa. So before, when you have the same min, they're considered one min mamish. So then fakert, you terim and yafa lara. We said two things that are not kalayim zebazeh. So you terim and yafa lara. Mashenkan over here, since this is lach and this is yavesh, so they're more dema the two minim. So even though aliba damas they're not two minim. But lepel, you shouldn't be terim, not min alach ala yavish and not min yavish ala alach. But b'diyevet, if you were terim, it's chal the trum. Halacha yudalef. Ein terim mi pei rishona zu, al pei rishona shavra. V'lei mi pei rishona shavra, al pei rishona zu. The meiser has to be given from the same period. V'im toram ein a truma, shanam hashona b'shona. This is liikuva. Just like we learned before liikuva, you can't be terim and atolish ala mechuber. So al derazu, you can't be teirish mitshona zu l'shona zu. Liket Yerek Erev Rosh Hashanah, actually Bar Shemesh. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, right before night. And V'chazav Liket Acher Shabbat Shemesh, and then after it became Rosh Hashanah. So then he was Malakit, is Ein Teim Mizelze, Shezeh Chodesh, V'zeh Yosha. This is from the previous year, for this from the next year. And you can't be mafresh from 1 year on the other year. There's the produce of 1 year, you can't be mafresh on the other year. Now what determines the produce of the year? So there's two inyanim. Firstly, you have to, when does the year start? So we're saying, legabi, these dinim of Maisus, the year starts in Rishchet. Legabi Maisus of Yerek, the year starts on Rosh Hashanah. Legabi Paris, it starts on Tu B'Shvat. So then you have to determine when is the previous year and when's the next year. And then there's another issue. How do you decide that this produce is from the previous year and this produce is from the next year? There's two inyanim. You have to know when does the year start and when does the year finish. And then you have to know what determines that this produce is from the previous year or from this year. Is Benegei Yerakis, first of all, the year, the Maisus of Yerakis is determined by Rosh Hashanah, and what decides when is it from this year, when is it from the next year, when the Likita, you go Basar Likita. Benegei L'mashal Peder Se'ila, normally, you don't go Basar Likita, you go Basar Shlish, Yavaz Shlish. So if you want to know if the apple is from the previous year, the year starts Tu B'Shvat, I'm sorry. The year starts Tu B'Shvat. If you want to know if this apple is from the previous year, from the next year, so it doesn't depend when the apple was picked. It was negeh when the apple came to a shlish. If the apple came to a shlish before Tu B'Shvat, it's from the previous year. If it came after Tu B'Shvat, it's from the next year. Masha'enkin B'negeh Yerakis, what determines which year it's from is Basar L'Kita. Now, B'negei Peder Se'ilon, there's an exception, B'negei and Esrig, that what determines which year it's from is also the Likita. So therefore, by an Esrig, it wouldn't depend if it brought a Shlish before Tu B'Shvat or it brought a Shlish after Tu B'Shvat. What we determine is when it was picked. It was picked before Tu B'Shvat, or was picked after Tu B'Shvat. That's what the Ram says, B'hamsh. V'chein, em Likit Esrig, B'erev Tu B'Shvat, actually Bo HaShemesh. And then, V'chazer V'likit Esrig, Acher Mishe Bo HaShemesh. Is ein termin mizelze, mepnei she'echad b'tishrei is Rosh Hashanah l'maises of Tvua v'kitnis v'yirakis. And the Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah l'maisus ha'ila. And you have to also add that what determines which year it's from is Menegeh Yirakis. Over there is determined by the Lakita. Masha'inki by Ilonis normally is determined by Avash Lish. Masha'inki and Esrig is an exception. And Esrig is determined by the fact that it was Basar L'Kita. Like the Rambam is going to say later on, Hilchos Maisos. Halacha Yud Beis. Ein termin Peiros Haaretz al Peiros Chutz La'aretz. V'lei mi Peiros Chutz La'aretz al Peiros Haaretz. Now the din is, which is going to be the hemshech of all the dinim, a number of dinim here, is that, in other words, when you want to be mafresh, Terumos or Maisos, you have to be mafresh from Tevel on Tevel. In other words, they both have to be Tovel L'Truma, Tovel L'Maisos, And then side the truma that you're being mafresh was tevel, and side the shirayim, which was being huter, was tevel. And then things that's killed chassid. Masha'enkin, if you mafresh something of tevel on something which wasn't tevel, so basically there was no afrosha. So mele, what you were mafresh still remained tevel. Or if you mafresh something that's not tevel on something that is tevel, so since what you were mafresh wasn't really tevel, so the shirayim, which is tevel, didn't become huter. They can't become huter unless you took part of the tevel and you made it truma ma'isa. So if you have peiros of chutzlaretz or peiros of Eretz Yisrael, so since peiros of Eretz Yisrael is minatera tevel, peiros of chutzlaretz is only midrabanan tevel. So maybe there's a problem if you can be mafresh from chutzlaretz and Eretz Yisrael, or Eretz Yisrael on chutzlaretz. You're basically being mafresh from tevel on a derisidic level, from something that's tevel on something that's not tevel, or something that's not tevel on something that's tevel. That's l'chura the din. Halacha yud beis. Ein termin peiros haaretz al peiros chutzlaretz, and also v'lei mi peiros chutzlaretz al peiros haaretz, and also v'lei mi peiros haaretz al peiros Surya, v'lei mi peiros Surya al peiros haaretz, because Surya is also has a din of chutzlaretz. Even though Surya is part of Eretz Yisrael, legabi certain dinim, but on the other end, it's not. It's only mechuyev and trumas and ma'ases midrabon. And people, the Radvaz is medayik that peiros chutzlaretz and peiros Surya you could be mafresh. The Ram doesn't say you cannot, because since they're both midrabanon, so you could be mafresh from peiros chutzlaretz and peiros Surya. And then v'lei mi peiros she'enon chayav mitruma kigen leket shikhu peya a peiros shenitru trumasim which you already mafresh the truma. So therefore they don't have a din of tevel anymore. Al peiros shechayav mitruma. V'lei peiros shechayav mitruma al peiros apturim. B'chlal peiros which shechayav you can use it for peiros which apturim. V'imtorim ena trumas. And the kudas advarim is that when you mafresh truma you have to be mafresh tevel to be matter tevel. But if you're being mafresh something which is tevel, to be matter something which is not tevel, which doesn't have a din chiyuv truma, or you're being mafresh something that doesn't have a chiyuv truma, to be matter something that has a chiyuv truma, you weren't yet. Now, hamafresh truma mi ma'aser rishon shalei nitla trumasi. You have ma'aser rishon which was lei nitla trumasi. So mele has a chiyuv of trumas ma'aser. But the truma gdela was already nifresh. It's not tovel for truma gdela. It's only tovel for trumas ma'aser. So now you're going to take Meiser Rishon, which is Tovel for Trumas Meiser, and you're going to use it to be Mafresh for something which is Tovel, Truma Gdeli, to be Mater, something, the Shirayim is going to be Tevel, which is Truma Gdeli. You didn't do anything. Because Lepel, this Meiser is not Mechuyev in Truma. So Legabi Truma, it's like Chul. So mainly you can't be Mafresh. It's a Mafresh Truma. In Meiser Rishon, Shali Nitlo Trumose. And in Meiser Sheni, Behegdish Shali Nivdu, which also has a Hegdish is al peiros acheres, abei trumas and truma, because they're not tavel truma. So in order to be mafresh for something which is a tevel for truma, you have to be mafresh and be mafresh truma from something which also tavel truma, which is the chiyuv afreshus truma. Halacha yudalet ein termin midover shuchayv benatera al dover shuchayv midivreim, which is really what we learned before, that ein termin from peiros chutzlaretz and Eretz Yisrael and also Eretz Yisrael and chutzlaretz, and das is ein termin midover shuchayv benatera al dover shuchayv midivreim v'leiman am mechuyev midivreim al chayv benatera. Now v'im tarim, if lepel you were terim, is trumasi truma. What you did was truma. However, v'yachze v'yitrim, you have to be mafresh truma again. Now, in this din, that trumasi truma v'yachze v'yitrim, there's a difference if you were terim from dover shuchayv min atera on a dover shuchayv midrabanan, or fakert on a dover shuchayv midrabanan on something that's chayv min atera. Whereas if you were terim from a dover that's chayv midrabanan on a dover that's chayv min atera, so the Maisa says, the dover that you were terim that was chayv midivreim had a din truma, and you don't have to worry about it. It was just like this was tevel. It was tevel midrabanan, and this tevel midrabanan was hufresh for something which was really tevel min atera. So this part that was hufresh has now a din of truma, has a din truma on a drabanan level. But the shirayim, which is the tevel min atera, still you have to be mafresh truma from, because the tevel that was only midrabanan can't be mater the tevel which is a tevel midiraisa. So in that case, when you did something which was tevel midivreim, which was only chayv midivreim, on something that's chayv min atera, so the part that you were mafresh for the chayv midivreim is fine, And the other part, which was chayv min atera, you have to be mafresh again. But what about fakert? If you take something that's chayv min atera and you mafresh it for something that was only chayv min drabanan, so over here, the part that you were mafresh it for, and those are the shirayim, so it's beseder, because lepel you were mafresh truma for it. But the truma itself is not beseder, because the truma is not considered truma unless it became truma from tevel. Lepel, the shirayim wasn't really tevel. The shirayim was only chayv and truma midrabanan. So in the case when you were mafresh from something that's mechuyev min atera for something that's mechuyev midrabanan, so over here the shirayim is beseder, but fakir, the truma that you were mafresh, you're going to have to mafresh again truma on that truma, because that truma really is still tevel. So memela, so when the Rambam says v'yazav v'yitreim, so it depends what's the v'yazav v'yitreim. When you were terim, nachma, when you were terim from something that was mechuyev min atera on something that was mechuyev midrabanan, so then the yazav v'yitreim is from the truma that you were terim that was really mechuyev min atera and didn't really become truma. It's still tevel. But the other tevel, which was midivreim, became mutter. Fakert, when you're terim something that's mechuyev midivreim on something that's mechuyev min atera, so over here the truma became truma, which was l'chatchila only mechuyev midrabanan. But on the other end, the shirayim has to be in the stocking, because the shirayim you didn't have really proper tevel that you were mafresh as truma for it. That's the Kes Mishnah that speaks it out. It's like Pashat and Pshat. Halacha Tezvov. Otzitz Nokuv Harehu Kaaretz. Otzitz Nokuv has a din like Eretz Yisrael. It's like part of the Eretz. V'kama Yehi B'nekev, in order for it to have a din of Oretz, Kedei Sheirish Cotton, the amount of space that a Sheirish could come out of that hole. V'hu Pachas Mikazayis, that's less than the size of a Kazayis. Now Zora Tvua Ba'otzitz She'ena Nokuv. V'hivia Shlish. It was already a Via Shlish while it was an Otzitz She'ena Nokuv, which it didn't have a din of the ground. V'acher kach nokvei, and v'nigmar atfua v'hu nokuv, but it started in the massive of nokuv after it was already a via shlish. So then it's hareu k'tzemeach b'sheini nokuv, achi yikvenu kedem shiyav shlish. So in order for something to have a din that it grew on the ground in a notzitz nokuv, is only if it was a nokuv before it was a via shlish. If the nokuv happened after it was a via shlish, so it already has a din of tvua that didn't grow in the ground, and the fact that it grew more doesn't make a difference. Halacha Tezai. Hatoirim miperes hagdelim ba'aretz, halagdelim ba'atzitz nokov. A miperes atzitz nokov halagdelim ba'aretz is trumasi truma, because they're both mechuyev and truma. They both have a din of growing ba'aretz. Side the one that grew ba'aretz mamish, and side the one that grew on the atzitz nokov has a din of growing ba'aretz. Now Torah misheini nokov ala nokov. So that's something that's not really mechuyev min atera on something that is mechuyev min atera. So trumasi truma, the truma is truma, which means what you are mafresh from the otzitz nokov has a din of truma. But v'yazav v'yitrim, you still have to be mafresh on what was there in the otzitz nokov. Now fakir torah min anokov al she'eni nokov. If you are terim min anokov al she'eni nokov, but something that's mechuyev, you did on something that wasn't mechuyev. So trumasi truma, the eini nokov, the truma is truma, and the eini nokov has a din of that is mesukin. But this truma that you were just teirim can't be nechel, because it wasn't really hufresh on something that's really a bar chiyuva, like we spoke in the previous case. And therefore, this truma that you were mafresh from the nokov al she'eni nokov, you cannot eat. So again, that's the same case like we said before. If it was from something that's mechuyev midrabanan, something that's mechuyev deraisa, so lepel mamish, the one that's mechuyev deraisa, needs to be in the stocking. Masha'enkin, if it's fakir, something that's mechuyev deraisa, and something that's not mechuyev deraisa, so then then the truma has to be in the stocking. So always the one that's mechuyev deraisa has to be in the stocking, depending if it's the one that's a truma, or if it's the shirai. Halacha Yudzai, Haterim min admai al admai, or min admai al avadai, so the din is trumasi truma. However, v'yachzer v'yitrim kolechet v'echet b'fnei atzmei. Now, if a person has dmai, so dmai you don't have to be mafresh truma. You have to be mafresh meiser, and from that meiser you have to give trumas meiser. So if you take dmai and you mafresh meiser, and from that dmai you take trumas meiser, so that trumas meiser is, again, it's a suffix, but you have to give it to the king. You sell it to the king. But I'll call upon him, the Trumas Maisa is a din, it has a din of Truma, no, it's on the same level of the suffix that it was Maisa, there's a suffix on the Trumas Maisa. Now, Benegay over here, when you have Dmai, let's say you bought payers from one Amoritz, and then you bought payers from another Amoritz, and each one is Dmai, and now you were Mafresh Maisa from this payers, and you were Mafresh Maisa from this payers. Then you went ahead and you were Mafresh Trumas Maisa from the Dmai that you bought from one Amoritz, and that became the Trumas Meiser on the Meiser that you bought, on the Meiser of the Dmai that you bought from the other Amoritz. So you're being Mafresh from one Dmai, all of it is Trumas Meiser, on the Meiser that you have from something else. Now, over here there's a suffix, because Trumas Meiser again has to be Truma from Meiser. In other words, if the other Meiser is not really Meiser, because it was, if you have, let's say, Amoritz 1 and Amoritz 2, so if we'll assume that Amoritz 1 was Taka, wasn't Mafresh Meiser, so this was Taka Meiser, and the Amoritz 2 was Mafresh Meiser, so that's not really Meiser. So now when you're taking all the Meiser that you took off of the Dmai from Amoritz 1, and you're making it as Trumas Meiser, you're taking off as Trumas Meiser for the Dmai that you had from Amoritz 2, so if Aliba Dam is Amoritz 2 was really Mafresh Meiser, there was no Meiser in the Dmai of Amoritz 2. So Mela, all of this is really Meiser, and you made it into Trumas Meiser, so it didn't have a din Trumas Meiser. Trumas Meiser can't make all the Meiser into Trumas Meiser. It doesn't have a din of Trumas Meiser. So Mela, it becomes a suffix really Sai on the, so it could be a suffix Sai on the Truma Meiser of Amoritz 1. And Al Derech Zeh Be'emes on the Meiser of Amoritz 2, because it could be Fakir. It could be the Meiser of Amoritz 1 wasn't really Meiser, because he was Yamafresh Meiser. Memele wasn't Tovel the Trumas Meiser. And Memele, the produce of Amoritz 2 wasn't the Staken. And Al Derech Zeh, if it was Vade needed a tikkun, so certainly it wasn't the Staken. So Be'emes, the suffix is Sai on what you were Mafresh, and Sai on the Shirai. But over here there was a special kula, that if you have Lishmol, two Dmai, two sets of Dmai, and you took off from one Dmai, Trumas Meiser, for the other Dmai, so even though Be'emes L'chura is a suffix, Sai on what you were Mafresh, and Sai on the Shirayim, but L'peil on what you were Mafresh, we say is considered Trumas Meiser, and the Kohen can eat it. Because L'chura it's a Chash Tevel. It's a Chash that if it wasn't really being Mafresh on anything, so it comes out that this in itself still remains Meiser, which you have to be Mafresh Trumas Meiser. But nevertheless, the Chacham were Mekel, because it's Dmai, and by Dmai B'chlal they were Mekel. So this Meiser, and there was a reason, because it would be a Chash, you may end up to be Mizalzel. So therefore, this Meiser, that you were Mafresh for the other Dmai, has a din of Meiser. Has a din of Meiser. Has a din of Trumas Meiser. I'm sorry, this Trumas Meiser, which you were Mafresh for the other Dmai, and certainly for the Vade, has a din of Trumas Meiser. However, the other Dmai, which you be Masakin with this Trumas Meiser, or certainly the Vade, which you were Masakin and that Trumas Meiser, that needs a tikkun again. So that's a Chiddush. A Chiddush is that even though Be'em is on what you were Mafresh Trumas Meiser really is also a suffix, because there's a tzad that the other thing is not really Chayiv and Meiser, and Memela said this doesn't really have a din of Trumas Meiser. If it doesn't have a din of Trumas Meiser, so then it's Mechuyiv in Trumas Meiser, it's Tevel of Trumas Meiser. But nevertheless, that was a Kivega talks it out here. Halach that there was a kula b'negeya this part that you are mafresh. Nachamo. Let's read inside. Halacha Yudzayin. Haterim min admai al admai. Someone was terim from admai al admai, or min admai al avade. So the din is trumasi truma. That's a chidush. That trumasi truma, and we don't have to worry about the truma. The part that you are mafresh, we consider as if it's 100% trumas ma'aser. However, the shirayim which you are mafresh on is v'yachze v'yitrim v'kolechad v'echad b'fnei atzmi. Kolechad v'echad means you should be terim either from the other dmai or from the other vaday b'fnei atzmi, because we're not really sure that what you were mafresh was really a din that was really meiser. So memela that there was really a din of trumas meiser, which could be mater the shirayim which you are trying to be mater, but it should be done b'fnei atzmi because you shouldn't mix it with other things, because maybe it was huter. So memela you're mafresh on that b'fnei atzmi, as you take this vaday or this suffix or this demai, and from there you're mafresh again trumas meiser. As you were mafresh from one demai on the other demai trumas meiser, and then you take that demai which was the shirayim, and from that you're again mafresh trumas meiser. B'fnei atzmi on separately, You don't mix it with other things because it's a suffix. Maybe it was nistaken. If you're going to mix it with other things, then it's going to become a whole shaila of tevel, b'chul, morav, and zebazeh. Now, Torah min havade al admai, it's fakert, you were teirem min havade al admai, you took the vade, which was vade mechuyev, and you were teirem al admai, is trumasi truma. Over here, the truma is truma. In other words, the dmai was nistaken. But on the other hand, is relate to yochel. You can't eat this vade, because since this vade, the chav vade, tevel, why the dmai was only a suffix tevel. So Mela, they said, you could eat it. The kohen could eat this trumas maisa, which is really a suffix trumas maisa. Because leitetzad that the other thing wasn't tevel, so it's not really trumas maisa, and it could really be tevel. But lepel, since it was only dmai, so mele they were mekel. Masha'enkan over here, this is a vadai. This was vadai tevel, and it's a suffix. Whether this tevel became truma because you took this tevel, which is vadai tevel the trumas maisa, and you were mafresh it on something which is a suffix. So mele you can go ahead and eat this vadai. Torah min avade alad mai trumasi truma, but v'leiti yochel at she'etzi oleh trumas mai. Halacha yudches ein termen shibolim alachitim or v'zeisim alashemen or vanov mal yain. Und es wird bepastet, a davar shalei nigmer mulachte and davar shenigmer mulachte. But over here is a chidush v'im Torah eina truma. Normally the din is that if you attain mi davar shalei nigmer mulachte al davar shenigmer mulachte, so even though lechatchila you shouldn't. But with the Eved, Trumasi Truma, over here there's a Chiddush, Im Torem Eine Truma. Why? Because Gzeira, Shema Yatriach HaKein Lidrich V'Lichtish. The din is evil, Bichal the Truma, so you made, there's a concern that you're going to like threaten the Kohen, that either you come and help me make the Shibolim into Chitim, or I'll give you Shibolim. And that would seem to be a serious concern. And therefore the Chazal instituted a Takana, which is a Chiddush, that even though Minatera it's Truma, but Lepeil Midrabon it doesn't have it in Truma. And that they have a Keach in such a case where there's a case of you have to be Geyser and you have to be worried about such a situation. They have the Keach to be Geyser that the Truma that Minatera you could be Mechel shouldn't have it in Truma. That the Truma that you Achal on the Shibolim shouldn't have it in Truma. That's so Bekitzu, you're not allowed to be Teirim from Shibolim, on Chitim from Zeisim al Shemen, and from Anov al Yain. Avol. Term is shemen al zeisim hanechboshim. There are zeisim which are being pickled. So zeisim which are aimed to take out oil from it, that's called from something that's nigrum malachti al davar shalim nigrum malachti. But over here, these zeisim hanechboshim, so they're already also nigrum malachti. Or v'yayin al anovim la zeisim smukim. Anovim which you have no intention of taking wine out of it, you're going to make it smukim, is also considered like nigrum malachti. Lemazah dema l'terim mishnei minim shenim kalayim zeh mizeh. Min hayofa and al ra. So since the yain is the yofa, and the anovim that you're going to make tzimukim is the ra, so maybe you could be taken from the yain on the anovim which you're oimed lasis tzimukim. V'chein termin mizesi shemen al zesi kevesh. Because you have zeisim which are called zesi shemen, which are saturated with oil. Then you have zeisim which are not so saturated with oil, and therefore kevesh they will be pickled. So you could be given truma from these zeisim and those zeisim. Avolem is Zesi Kevish al Zesi Shemen, because that's min hara ala yofa. Al that is a miyayin she'enim mavushal ala mavushal. Yayin she'enim mavushal is better than yayin mavushal. Avolem min mavushal al she'enim mavushal, or min atzol al she'enim tzol, wine that's pure that doesn't have the dregs in it. Avolem she'enim tzol al atzol, or miteinim ala gregers b'minyan. If you notice, if you want to take truma echad michamishim or echad me'arboim or whatever the shear is. So the question is, are you taking it b'minyan or you're taking it b'midah? Now, fresh figs are larger than dried figs. So when you're doing miteinim al gregers b'minyan, that's fine. Because lapel, you're saying, I have 50 figs, and I'm giving one fresh fig. And part of those 50 figs are gregers, so it comes out being more than a 50th. However, if you're giving migregers alatainim, if you're giving migregers alatainim, and you're giving gregers, let's say in a place where you want to, it has to be last because there's no kohen like we learned before. So then you should give it b'midah. You should give it b'midah because dried figs are smaller volume than large figs. So mainly you're going to end up giving more if you give it when you're giving gregers on te'enim. So giving it b'midah will end up giving you more. If you're giving te'enim al gregers, so giving it b'minyan will end up being more. It's partial. So mit einem al gregris b'minyan. However, mit gregris al ateinim, if you're giving gregris on teinim, so then you should do b'teinim, b'mida, you should do it with size. Avalei teinim al gregris b'mida, you shouldn't be mafresh teinim on gregris b'mida, because lepeil, it's the teinim take up more space, and avalei gregris al ateinim b'minyan, because lepeil, there's a number of them of this, in other words, it won't take up as much space. The gregars are dry, so they're shriveled up. The Nekudas Advarim is that when minyan is ayin yafa, those gregars alat einim, minyan is ayin yafa, so you give a minyan. When volume is an ayin yafa, fakert. When minyan is an ayin yafa, that's the einim alat gregars that you give a minyan. And when volume is an ayin yafa, so then you give like gregars alat einim, so then you give b'mida. In other words, chitim and a pas is also the same thing, because chitim, a little bit chitim, make a lot of pas. So if you're going to give the volume of chitim to the volume of pas, so then you're giving much more. So you're giving chitim ala pas. You don't have, in other words, if you're going to have the size of the pas, like the pas of the chitim, the pas has also, in other words, the pas gets blown up. So in Mela, so you always have to give when you're giving the truma, you should give it in a way that you're being mafresh ba'ayin yofa. In other words, you're not giving, even though it seems to be this is the same volume and this is the same volume, but the volume of chitim is concentrated volume, and the volume of pas is not such a concentrated volume. B'chol elu, however, in Torah is Terumos truma, because lepeil, even if naral yofa, so certainly over here it's not a question of naral yofa. Over here it's a question in order to bring a person to give more. Halacha yutes. Ein term in shemen ala zeisim hanichtoshim. You have already oil and you have zeisim which you are going to press. Or v'lei yayin ala novim hanidrachis. Because you said datim, the terem midavar shenigrum malachte, adavar shalei nigrum malachte. This is, you have the wine ready and this you are going to press. However, vim taram, trumasi truma, and here is the din, a chidush, that even though normally, when it's a davar normally in such a case, min aral ayofa, or midavar shalei nigrum malachte, adavar shenigrum malachte, so b'diavad truma is truma, but over here there was a special takana, vim taram, trumasi truma, abaviyazar v'yitrim min hazeisim min anov mifneatzim. You should go ahead and be teirem again min hazeisim b'anov. Special takana d'Rabbanan, that over here when you attain them in hayayin alu anovim, which are about to be pressed, or from shemen on zeisim, which are going to be pressed, so then you should go ahead and be teirem again in hazeisim anovim. In harishena, the first truma that you are mafresh, which is truma min atera, is midabas b'fliatzma, as a din of midamea. So midamas means that you have to have 100 connected. It's the din of dimu of truma. And v'oichla, someone that eats that truma, the first truma, when you were teirem in Hashem and on zeisim that are niktoshim, so chayiv aleh kishar truma is gmuris. Avolei min hashniya, but legabi the shniya that doesn't have a din of dimua, that din of midamas that it's echad b'meya, it's only echad b'meya, which is in the Rabbanan, doesn't apply to that second truma, which you're being mafresh from the zeisim of the anovim itself. And al derech zeh, this chiyuv that you have for eating truma, the chiyuv of eating truma also doesn't apply. There's a chiyuv of eating truma, and there's a chiyuv of misim de shemayim, and al derech zeh, there's a chiyuv malchus, and al derech zeh, there could be a chiyuv chemish. All these dinim don't apply to that second din of truma. Halacha chof. Mi shetoram shemen al zeisim shedaiti loichla. In other words, here you have, before we spoke about zeisim, hanichtoshim. Over here we're talking about zeisim shedaiti loichla, or zeisim al zeisim, and v'daiti al akel achila. So you're being mafresh zeisim for other zeisim, and you're interested in eating all of it. Eshetorim yayin alanov m'shem lachila, el anov malanov ma'akel lachila. And then after you were mafresh the truma is v'nimlach l'dercham, then you decided to go and kvetch out the anovim, and v'dorach hazeisim v'hanovim shekvar torim aleim. So that is ein tzorach la'azav v'litin. In other words, if you were torim from yayin on anovim, which you are going to be derech, or zeisim, which you're going to be koitish, so then there's a din that even though trumos you have to be yazav v'yitrim. Mashenker over here, when you were mafresh it wasn't daite to be koitis or to be lidrech. Just later on, you made that decision. So since when you were mafresh the truma was killed chasei, because it wasn't like a dover shalei nigma malachti, because you weren't intending on being mafresh, making it into wine. So therefore, there's no din that you have to be chayzer v'teira. Halacha chafalef ein termin chemes al hayayin, avol termin yayin al hachemes. Shayayin v'achemes min echadu. Memele the yayin is the yafa and the chemes is not yafa, and therefore you can be terim min hayayin al hachemes. Now hoya belibe litri min hayayin al hayayin. And v'nimtza biyadi chemes. He thought that he was being mafresh yayin al hayayin. And Lepel, it ended up that really he was being mafresh chemes. So Mele, it's a mistake. He didn't have in mind to make this chemes into truma on the yayin. He thought it was yayin. So therefore, ain't a truma. Therefore, it's not called truma. Ahoye believe a litrin chemes ala chemes v'nimtza chemes shetarim yayin. So even though he thought it was chemes, but Lepel yayin is even better. So it comes out that he's being terim and ayafalara. So Memele is truma is truma. His truma is in truma, and we don't say that if he would have known it's yayin, he wouldn't have been mafresh. So we say no, that the truma is truma, and memela, it's chal. Halacha chal. So nachamo, when he thought it was yayin and it ended up being chemes, it's not chal. But if he thought it was chemes and it ended up being yayin, it is chal. Halacha chal beis. Hatoirim chavish shel yayin al yayin, and lepel is v'nimtza chemes, and he found out the lepel now he sees it's chemes. Now the question is, when did it become chemes? Im yedei shoyse chemes actually tarma. It was chemes. When he actually was mafresh the truma, it was already chemes. He thought it was yayin. Now he realizes it's chemes, and now he realizes it was chemes originally. So ain't a truma. That's what he said before. Then if you thought you're being mafresh yayin, and lepel you ended up being mafresh chemes, so it's not truma. However, v'im achar shetar mechmitza, if you know for sure that it was achar shetar mechmitza, so vadas is a truma. Lepel, when you were mafresh this yayin on the yayin, so memela it was yayin. So even though later it became chemes, so lepel it was chal truma. However, it's in sofik. In other words, you were mafresh. You thought you were being mafresh yayin al yayin, and now you see that this what you were mafresh is chemes, but you don't know when it became chemes. Was it chemes when you were mafresh it al yayin, or did it become chemes later? So the im sofik. So then it's truma. It is truma. But on the other end, you have to take truma again. Because you're not really sure if the first truma had a din of truma, because if it was chemes before, so it didn't have a din of truma. V'chein ha-terim kishus, v'nimtza smara, you find out you're being terim kishus, which is a type of zucchini, and v'nimtza smara, and they found bitter, which is not really edible. Over here, it's not the type that, if it was taka not edible, so nothing was chal. Over here again, it's a suffix. When did it become mara? Did it become mara before you were mafresh for truma, or did it become mara after you were mafresh for truma? Or avatiyav, and if it's a seruach, later on you see that it's seruach, and again you don't know when it became seruach. You see that it was poked at from animals, and you don't know. And once it was is nikurim, it's not edible. You're not allowed to eat it. It's sakons nefashos. But so memela it's not chal any truma. But if the question was when the nikurim happened, or tarim chavish shel yayin, which is asol ishtesa. So all these cases, you were mafresh truma, but you don't know if the truma was chal, because you don't know if the matzah that you see now is the same matzah that was there when you were mafresh the truma, and therefore the truma wasn't chal, or maybe no. Before that, the matzah was differently. It was regular. It was avatiach, and it was royal achila, and just that changed later. So the din is megulish asol ishtesa. So the din is truma. What you were mafresh has a din of truma. However, v'yazav yitrim shniya. Since it's a suffix, maybe it wasn't chal, so you have to be mafresh truma a second time. And ve'ein achas mishteim midamas b'fnei atzma. Neither of them. Now there's a special din that truma is midamas, which means there's a chum yudrabanan that in 1 in 100 it needs 100 to be mavatal. If it's in less than 100, in 99 towards it, so it's midamas. Now, since each of them is only a suffix truma, so therefore they become batal bereif. There's no din of midamas. Ve'ein achas mishteim midamas. Heil v'ha'echel achas mishteim is ein chayiv chemish. Again, because since each one is a suffix, so normally when you eat truma b'shegig, you have to pay a extra chemish. Besides the keren, you have to pay an extra chemish. But over here, since it's a suffix truma, so memeli you part from the chemish. Ketzah. Nafla achas mehem ala chulin is enim damas. Nafla shniya l'mokim acher to a different place is also enim damat. However, nafla shteim l'mokim acher, if both of them fell to the same place, is medam is kiktanish b'shteim. So then we name on that certainly at least the lower of less of the shiurim is truma. There's one of them is truma, either the first or the second. So in other words, let's say if the first was a larger share, the second was a smaller share, so at least we know the smaller share is definitely, there's at least a smaller share of truma, so therefore there has to be at least, in order for it not to be in damas, there has to be 100 times of the lesser share. Whereas if there's no 100 times of the lesser share, so then it's midamas. V'cheinem ochel zor shteyim, he ate both of them, is mishalim b'kitanim shevishneim. V'chumshe, he has to pay at least, he has to pay a chaimish for the lesser share. V'keitzu du esa b'shneim, what could he do? He knows he was mafresh truma twice. He's not mechuyev to give to the kohen twice truma. So what he does is, neisen l'kein echad, he takes both trumas and he gives it to one kohen, and v'neitel min ha-kohen, the me'agdele, he tells the kohen, listen, in this truma, there's definitely truma. Certainly the smaller share is truma, could be the larger share is truma, but the smaller share is for sure truma. But I'm not mechuyev to give you the larger share. So Memela, so give me back the value of the larger share. And Memela, so he was mekayim his mitzvahs and sinas truma, no, it was the vade truma he gave, and the suffolk truma he got back paid. Halacha chavdal, habeidik is a chavis. He has a chavis which he knows is proper wine, and v'hinicha he left this wine la frisha truma lacherim achet yasa kula truma v'yitnanu l'kein. In his mind, he's gonna have other wine. He's gonna say that he wants to be mafresh truma on that other wine. So the truma on that other wine is gonna say is in this barrel of wine. So he knows how much he has in the barrel, and he keeps adding. So the percentage of the barrel until the barrel becomes completely truma. Now, La'achar Zman, originally he was baiting the barrel and he realized that the barrel is wine. Then La'achar Zman, later on, Botka, he was baiting this barrel, which he was kept on adding, that there's more and more truma in this barrel for other tevel that he has. La'achar Zman, Botka, Matzachemis. So the din is as a Botka Tchila Ad Gimel Yom knows if he was the baiting this barrel originally and he saw that it was white. So from there on, for 3 days, Vadiyai. And v'chol yayin shechoshev eisna yom shatu v'shalei b'chavizu. Knows any cheshbenis that he made during those 3 days, that the wine in the chavis should be truma for some other wines. It's harei masukin. Those other wines are masukin because it was that we nemon that it was definitely wine for 3 days. There's always a suffix. We're not really sure because you have wine and you are mafresh for this wine in that barrel. Now we see that barrel is chometz, and you thought it was wine. So Mela comes out that really the truma wasn't chal. You don't know if the truma was chal. It's a suffix. If it was chometz, it wasn't chal, and if it was wine, it was chal. So it's again the kan ve'elach suffix, and the suffix lahafish mena truma shniya, just like we said before. Then when you have a suffix, there's a person. B'kitzur, the nekudas hadvarim is that if a person is mafresh truma and there's a suffix whether the truma was chal, so you have to be mafresh truma again. And what do? So you have the 2 trumas, and then you have to deal with the 2 trumas, as we said before. Sai benegei medamas and sai benegei the chiyuv to give it to the king. Halacha chafei. B'shleisha prakim 3 times a year tzarich livdik es hayayin shehinichei lifresh olav shema hichmetz. In a case where a person has a barrel of wine and he's using that barrel of wine to be mafresh truma for other wines. So he has to, 3 times a year, he has to be baidik whether that wine changed and became chometz. Because those times are times which are more possible, more old that they should become chometz. Ve'eluhein. First of all, the kodim shel mitzoy chag, when the east wind starts blowing after Sukkot, so at that point in time, so also things change and the wind is blowing, so that could cause wine to become chometz, vinegar. And also mitzoy hasmodar, when the buds on the vines start budding out, so that also is a time when Weister the wine becomes sour, chometz. At that point in time, the time of Itzoyas Hasmader, that's when the buds are falling off off the vines, and really, Etzoyas means the buds are falling off the vines, and you start seeing the grapes. And also, b'shas knisses mayim lebeser. Beser is a certain level of the wines before it's nigmar. But at that point in time, when the grapes are starting to fill up with liquid, they're starting to fill up with liquid. The beiser is a stage of the growth of the grapes. So when the liquid starts filling up the beiser, that's also the time when you should be biting the barrel. So 3 times: the time when there's the wind blowing, mitzoy chachag, when it's the itzoy sasmader, when the buds are falling off the vines and you're starting to see the grapes, and when the grapes and the size of the beiser start filling up with water. Now, v'yayin megite, if you have yayin megite, as you just press the wine, fresh wine, is mafrishna b'cheska shul yayin ad mem yain. Before we said when you check a barrel of wine, so you could assume that 3 days after checking the barrel of wine, it's still wine. When you have fresh wine, so fresh wine, you could assume that for 40 days it's definitely remained wine and didn't become sour, it didn't become vinegar. Halacha chavov, hamafrish peiris, haminiach peiris liyas mafrishna lein achi yosu truma. So that's what we said before. The same thing we had with the wine. You had the barrel of wine that you left it there, and over here you're talking about haminiach peiris. You're putting peiris down, and you want that these peiris should be used as truma for other peiris. Generally, the rule is that you shouldn't be mafresh. You shouldn't be saying that the peiris in this area should be truma and peiris in another area. The peiris that you're being mafresh truma should be next to the peiris which are the shirayim, which are being knitter through the afrasha. However, im hifresh, if lapel you were mafresh, is areim becheskes kayom. You could assume that those peiris that you put away are becheskes kayom. You put away a box of apples, and you're saying that these apples are going to be truma for all kinds of apples in the future that you're going to have in mind. You're going to say that the apples in this box should be truma for these other apples. So if the harei becheskes kayom, you could assume that those apples are there. Motzon shavdu is harei zecheshesh l'chol mashatikim. Shemali hifresh alei achashavdu l'filchach mafresh truma shir, which is the same thing we learned before. In other words, whenever you are mafresh truma, and now all of a sudden there's this gala that there's a suffix, whether the thing you were mafresh truma, the truma that you were mafresh wasn't there, or the truma that you were mafresh became chaymetz, or it became something which is ein roy la'achila. So in all these cases, we say that you have to be mafresh truma a second time.